Hello and welcome everybody, I'm OneProperVarian and today we got a big piece of news coming out for Crusader Kings III upcoming DLC Legends of the Dead. This DLC will be releasing on the 6th of March and we today learned how legitimacy, how legends work, and that there will be quite a bit of eye candy going forward. In this video I will tell you everything that you need to know so that you can stay informed. Now, since this dev diary is incredibly long, let's just jump straight in by talking about Legends. Legends is a gameplay feature that they announced last week and that we haven't really seen in this capacity in CK2 or in CK3, although of course historically speaking it was incredibly important. In Crusader Kings II we had something called Bloodlines, which can be similar on a surface level, but as we now will learn is actually quite different from what we are getting with Legends in CK3. Historically speaking, most of the dynasties that exist on the map right here were of course tracing themselves back to important figures, whether they were real or fictional, such as for example King Arthur or Charlemagne. The idea was that if you were able to trace yourself back to these inspiring figures, that you would also be a legitimate and wise ruler. With Legends, we can now do this. Legends have a type and a quality level. The quality level starts at Famed, then there's Illustrious, and finally Mythical. Each of these levels gives out a progressively more powerful reward. You can increase the quality of the legend when it has spread far enough, meaning that you can pick up just a Famed legend and actually make it better as time passes. However, the developers do state that this will mean that the legend has to spread even outside of your realm, which means that if you want a mythical legend, you can't just contain it to Brittany, it also has to be in England, France, and so on. Now, the rewards of the quality levels can differ quite significantly, as you can see right here. If you finish this Famed legend, you get everything that it lists here, and most importantly, I want to point out that you will get a claim on every existing de jure title inside of the Kingdom of Bohemia, so your own kingdom. However, if you lift this legend up to be mythical, you can gain access to so much more. For example, the Consolidate the Kingdom decision. This will allow you to immediately de jure drift a kingdom into your realm, which is amazing because de jure drift otherwise takes ages. This definitely seems worthwhile. Not to mention that you will also get a pressed claim, so an inheritable claim, on the Holy Roman Empire itself. I mean, my god, that is definitely worth it. I hope that the cost will actually also be quite significant if it is a mythical legend, because damn, yeah, the rewards are insane. Now, as for the types, legends can be heroic, holy, or legitimizing. Those are the three different variants. Heroic legends give additional prestige modifiers and other thematic rewards that reflect your heroism, like the decision of launching a legendary adventure or demanding local submission. The legendary adventure Casus Belli is something that I definitely love, because it will mean that I don't have to force myself into being Viking or having a particular cultural heritage. I can simply migrate if I want to, and that's always exciting. In particular, of course, with landless gameplay coming our way. Holy legends, on the other hand, are focused around piety, as the name implies. This will allow the protagonist to even gain the saint trait at the highest level, if the appropriate dynasty perk has been unlocked. You can see it right here, we get two new dynasty legacy tracks as well, Heroic Bloodline and Legitimacy. If you unlock Golden Legend, you can gain the saint trait if you indeed complete the mythical Holy Legend. Now, I'm a bit split on this. I like additional rewards, and quite frankly, making legacy tracks more interesting is something I will always welcome. But to be honest, being a saint means something very specific, for example in the Catholic Church, and I am really still longing for some more fleshed out mechanics behind that, both for saint traits, for pilgrimages, and so on. But for the time being, this will definitely make it much more engaging to get a holy legend. Lastly, legitimizing legends will give you double the amount of legitimacy and allow you to get new powerful claims to expand your realm. We can see this in the comparison that we already saw earlier, in the comparison between Famed and Mythical legends, because this is a legitimizing legend. This is everything that we know when it comes to legend types and quality levels. Something that you can do for all kinds of legends is indeed choosing the legend protagonist. Among the possible options are your relatives, even if dead, and choosing someone other than yourself will also grant you extra legitimacy, so you can dedicate your legend to your dragon hunting grandpa. Basically, the idea here is that you can always claim descent. You can either pick yourself as the legend protagonist or somebody that you really loved when you were playing them while they were still alive. Alright, that is everything when it comes to understanding legends in general, but how do you actually start one? Every legend is born from a legend seed. Some characters start with historical seeds on game start, like the Capaians have the heirs of Charlemagne or the Hunnic heritage, available for nomadic cultures that claim to be descendant from Attila himself. Now of course, these are only two examples of legend seeds. They previously already mentioned King Arthur, so I assume he is around, and I will just say that I find it really interesting, because the more historical legends there are, of course, the more interesting will it be to play anywhere in the world. I can only think of Bohemia, I can think of Poland, I can think of the Rus, all of which sourced themselves to one particular predecessor. Now besides these historical legend seeds, you can also gain them in other more generic ways. For example, if you win important wars, hunt a legendary animal, or take major decisions. Alternatively, if you're not in the business of doing grand things, you can simply hire a capable court chronicler and pay them enough gold so that they can manage to make an ancient document appear mentioning your long-lasting dynasty. Now as a player, I'm going to be honest with you, obviously it's nice that you can simply hire a court chronicler and from there start generic legend seeds, but I love the idea that legends, generically speaking, are designed in a way where they basically enhance the reward for decisions that already exist. If you meant the Great Schism, I mean, that's an insane accomplishment, but nobody really appreciates it. It doesn't linger in the world. Since you gain a Holy Legend seed, you can declare the person that did it a saint right after. I love that idea. There's so much tedious work that goes into these major decisions like restoring Rome and so on. Getting even more rewards, I think, is definitely worth it. Now there's an additional thing here that I really like, because it includes more people into how legends work, how they spread, and of course how they are perceived. It turns out that not only the owner of the legend, so the person with a legend seed, can support the legend, but also any relevant character that can become a promoter. This is a much cheaper alternative since you don't need the seeds, and I assume the maintenance is just much cheaper. This will also grant you special bonuses, as well as helping the legend spread on your lands. The higher quality the legend, the bigger the rewards for you. You can see it right here. Being a promoter gives, for example, for heirs of Charlemagne, a stewardship as well as renown, which is of course quite significant. But yeah, it makes sense. Charlemagne ruled a realm, and in this realm they were very organized, so getting some stewardship, getting some renown, if you are in contact with the story of this heroic man, that makes perfect sense to me, and hey, much more importantly, makes it just much more interesting rather than if it is just a relationship that the legend seed has with a legend owner. I like this a lot. Now while such a legend is spreading, you will be getting flavor events of both people reacting to your legend in different manners, along with your chronicler and courtiers fervently asking you to recount the story just once more, making it possible to introduce, for example, some minor alterations to the text. If, for example, your grandpa didn't actually slay a dragon, but, well, Cthulhu. Now all of this also works together with something that is normally relatively underutilized: court position tasks. Your musicians and poets can sing of the legend to make it easier to spread the legend inside of your realm or get them to try and convince supporters abroad. Finally, the minstrels will have a proper usage. And then when everything is said and done, you might get an artifact, you might get a special building, but of course you will also always get the amazing benefits that, well, you were promised. And that is effectively how legends work. I will tell you right now that this isn't really Bloodlines from Crusader Kings II, although that was my impression when the first dev diary came out. I really like what I'm seeing here, because it doesn't just require you to do a deed, it also makes it so that somebody that didn't do the deed but is related to you can honor you with it. I really like the concept of this. What I specifically like here is that this doesn't just interact with legitimacy, it also interacts with other people adjacent to your legend, it interacts with court positions, it interacts of course with the local legends, which will pull us further into the medieval mindset. But this also sits down and takes a look at already existing decisions, further enhancing them by connecting them directly to a legend seed. I really like the concept of this. My one big fear is, and I think that this will still be the case because it's Crusader Kings III, I mean this is just how it always is, that this will further power creep us. It seems like we are getting something very, very positive. I just hope, and we're going to learn about this next week, that plagues will be so dire that, yeah, the positives here are slightly outweighed by it. Because, well, this sounds amazing. Alright, but let's move to the second topic of the dev diary release today: legitimacy. Legitimacy will be a measurement of different systems that already existed in the game, but were not directly connected to each other. For example, short reign penalties, popular opinion, vassalization, and marriage acceptance reasons, etc, etc. The game was already trying to reflect how legitimate of a ruler you were, but was trying to do so with prestige and renown in non-consistent ways. Prestige is a reflection of the social influence of the character, not an indication of them being the right person to the throne. You can be a highly prestigious king of the Capaian dynasty, But should you be the Emperor of Byzantium? And that is where legitimacy comes in. Legitimacy and its effects scale with title tier. It's not the same being a level 5 Emperor, where everyone expects you to be the right person for the job, than a level 5 Duke, where everyone is impressed with your overachieving. We can see a comparison between the levels 0 and the levels 5 of legitimacy levels, right here between being a count and being an emperor. And I actually really like this. We can see that the positives are quite pronounced for counts, whereas on the emperor side, they are relatively minor compared to, what they're looking like on the count side, while the negatives are so goddamn pronounced that I hope that it will be quite a bit more difficult for emperors to actually rule in eternal peace. Right now it's very easy. Now it might still be very easy after this, but I will say that I really like the dynamic here. It will also be easier to go up and down levels the lower your tier, as it is harder to convince people once they've formed an idea of who their king is. Which means that if your king comes in with a bad legitimacy level, that's probably where they're going to stay unless they do something massive. Legitimacy also scales with the in-game era, and the levels are smaller in the tribal and early medieval eras. This isn't news, that is basically the case for virtually anything, such as for example court grandeur. Legitimacy is calculated through a series of factors, mainly attached to who you are in relation to your title, the level of splendor of your dynasty, how long you've been on the throne, who your parents were, or for example your traits, being a bastard, and so on. When you die, a part of your legitimacy will be passed down to your heir, but they will get a calculation of their own based on who they are. It's not the same to have your firstborn inherit than a third cousin. Legitimacy can be gained through various means. For example, legends are one of the main ways to gain it. Holding activities, holding court, and doing what's expected of a ruler will also help increase it, as well as winning wars. Now, winning a wars will also of course be relative, because it's not the same to win a war against a duke if you are an emperor, compared to a duke winning a war against you. Legitimacy can also be lost. Losing battles, especially to factions and especially to claimant factions, will make you look pretty bad. Additionally, if a peasant rebellion appears, this will also signify that you're not taking good care of your subjects. Rulers, since they were seen as representatives of God on earth, were of course also blamed for plagues, so allowing them to hit your capital will also make you appear less legitimate in the eyes of your vassals. And now last but very much not least, what will also take away your legitimacy is disinheriting or forcing kids to take the vows. Now I think it's very obvious to anybody that's playing this game that this is just a very clear nerf to disinheriting, because it is so damn powerful as an inheritance management tool. So that is how you gain and how you lose legitimacy, and of course how legitimacy works in general. Your vassals will also actually have expectations. This is something we already know from court grandeur as well. What exactly the expectation is calculated based on your tier, era, and how long your family has ruled over theirs, besides their opinion and relationship to you. I really like the dynastic approach there, where if my family rules in Brittany over the same counts for several hundred years, people just will be a lot calmer. Now, if you don't meet your vassal expectations, this will make them discontent and more likely to join factions against you. All in all, legitimacy levels will affect all sorts of things in the game. Casus belli cost, marriage and alliance acceptance, faction formation, and even the counties necessary to create a title. So this is everything with regards to how legitimacy functions. In general, I personally am a big fan, but I do want to point out, and I know that I keep coming back to the Royal Court DLC, but is it just me, or does this kind of clash and not really vibe with the court grandeur? They are of course not exactly the same, but they don't seem to be impacting each other at all, which does feel kind of weird. While I do like the execution and the idea of legitimacy quite a bit, I do once more really just want to say that I feel like the Royal Court, yeah, it's just the neglected child at this point. Now, the developers also go into great detail about the artwork for this DLC, how it happened, how it went, and exactly what the process behind it is, which is really cool, but I'm going to skip over this primarily because it's all images, and I will just really encourage you to go into the forum yourself with a link in the description and check this out. The one other thing that is really interesting to me, and we already talked about this in the last video, is that we are now getting map tables. If you've played Victoria 3, then you will already be somewhat familiar with this, but map tables are now also coming to Crusader Kings III. With the release of Legends of the Dead on the 6th of March, there will now be added 2 new map tables. The tables are chosen dynamically, or if you have a preference, you can also change the active one in the settings menu. Different from Victoria 3, it seems that the tables are coming wholesale, so instead of you being able to choose individual elements, it's one table or the other. Of course, if you don't own the DLC, this is the second table right here, you will be getting a normal table, where we can see the shield of the actual character on the front of Crusader Kings, and then of course some other interesting items as well. I think the document in the bottom left right there is some kind of Crusader Kings III lore about the fox and the bear. They've been in the trailers over the last years. I think there's a feud going on there that is an actual story, but honestly, I have no idea what's happening there. I really like the idea of the tables, and I think that they are pretty nice cosmetical additions. Speaking of cosmetical additions, let's talk about legendary buildings. As you finish your legends, you will find opportunities to add a new site in your kingdom. This site will commemorate or relate to the legend that you've sown and grown. These legendary locations provide bonuses, but also show up in the landscape of your realm. I absolutely love this. The more eye candy we get on the map, the happier I will be, and in this case, this should mean that the map now finally will also be quite dynamic. I would love it even more if these legendary buildings were, configurable. I keep talking about it, but Imperator Rome has an amazing Great Work DLC. And in that DLC, you can basically modify them. They will age and become more impressive over many, many centuries passing, and I would love to see the same right here. I don't think that's the case, but we are clearly going into a much more alive-looking map, this being a pretty big part of it. And then, last but very much not least, they are also adding new instruments. These were done in cooperation with none other than El Tyrannos, the person that has already published the most recent Content Creator Pack DLC for the game. I really love this. I think any piece of eye candy, any piece of 3D work is always nice to see. Now this was what the developers gave us this week. You've heard my opinions and I would love to hear yours, so make sure to leave a comment down below. Next week we're going to be talking about plagues, the Black Death, funerals, mod support and showcasing the new character art. Now people say to stay away from death, but I'm really looking forward to learning more about what is going to hemorrhage us coming the next update. So I will see you next week and I'll see you later, alligator.